Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This is Season 14, Episode 14. Today I'm speaking with author Sara Calvosa Olson, who invites home cooks on a delicious adventure in her sumptuous cookbook, Chími Nu'am. This beautifully presented volume offers a unique perspective on California cuisine, reimagining traditional indigenous dishes for the modern kitchen. Olson, a Bay Area food writer and editor, brings a wealth of knowledge and passion to the table. Her work explores the intersection of storytelling, indigenous food systems, and cultural revitalization. Her recipes have been featured in publications like News from Native California and Edible Shasta Butte. I'm now going to take you to my conversation with Sara Calvosa Olson. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I'm very honored to have on the program Sara Calvosa Olson, who is an author who's written a new cookbook, Chími Nu'am, Native California Foodways for the Contemporary Kitchen. Sara, welcome to the podcast.
Ayuki, Yotwa, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Can you talk to us a little bit how you became interested in working with food? Were you influenced by relatives who cooked when you were growing up?
Yeah, I definitely was. I'm the eldest daughter and first grandchild, first niece, all of that. My dad is from an Italian Calabrese family, and my mother is Karuk, which have a really strong foodways throughout both of those cultural lifeways, and especially I think Italian food. When I think about what first influenced me, it definitely would have been the food and my grandpa and the way that he cooked with so much love and time, and getting used to the fact that good things can take time to make, and that you put all your love into it, and it can be an expression of how much you love someone.
I would imagine there'd be some similarities or overlaps in the two styles of cooking, because Italians cook with natural ingredients that are seasonal, and they like to, cook with things that they find, you'll find, in many Italian cuisines, like chestnuts being used, things that they, forage for sometimes. So in Italian cuisine, they're very much keep it simple, keep it natural. And is that similar to the way that you cooked from, was it the Karuk?
Karuk, you can...
Karuk, yeah.
Karuk with an R-U-K, Karuk, if you want.
Karuk, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Is it similar to that cooking style?
Well, it's hard to compare them just because there is not a lot, as much information, I think, and as much documentation about traditional foodways for Karuk people. And right now it is really more like Karuk food is the food that Karuk people make, and how
Gotcha.
we are adapting our traditional gathering with, we have some traditional foods that we keep in very similar, really similar to recognizable to how these foods would have been prepared, pre-colonization. And then there's new ways of bringing our foods into our kitchens, which is really, I think, my favorite way of using our foods is to try to combine it and to use modern tools, just so that, I'm using our foods in every day, in every part of our, like in all of our every day in all parts of our foodways.
Before we start talking about the cookbook, can we talk about Fry Bread Riot, a group you've been working with online? How did that start for you, and what did that mean for you?
Fine, that's fine. So yeah, the Fry Bread Riot group, and my Instagram is called the Fry Bread Riot. So I just used the same name from my Instagram account, and it was meant for us to be able to share with each other, highlight events that were food related, and news or videos sharing what people were doing. And it was a place for us to basically share recipes, engage, do some trading. And I haven't had a lot of time to head back and manage it or grow it, but it seems to be growing on its own. But Yeah, so that was how it started, and it has been it's not as active as I would have liked it to be, but I'm out I feel like I'm going every second of the day, so I don't have any time, but I would love to, go back and work on it.
Did you have people reaching out to you and comparing stories
Mhm.
when you started it? What was it like for you to kind of hear from other people around the world?
It was wonderful. I actually was able to meet some people from Sami people, and
Hmm.
he made a cookbook in Sami cookbook,
Oh my God.
traditional Sami foods like reindeer, of obviously reindeer, but lots of different types of recipes that were really fascinating and really delicious. And they just did such a beautiful job. So that was the most exciting thing. So yeah. And it actually helped me formulate my own cookbook, which I was struggling with because I had intended for my cookbook to be more of a collection of essays of people doing food work around Indian country and a few recipes sprinkled throughout. But then as I sat down to write it, the pandemic happened. So
Yeah.
I couldn't travel to our communities and do any work in the community. So it really put a pause on that. And I had to make it much more personal about what I do in my home and how I connect to these foods and how I connect my children to the foods. So these are all recipes from me. And I'm not a chef or I don't work in the restaurant industry. I'm a cook. So I cook at home and so there was a lot of stress around that.
Well, had you always wanted to write a cookbook, or did it just one day you had such inspiration to do it?
I don't know that I had always wanted to write a cookbook. I wouldn't say, yeah, I don't think that I had aspirations. I don't yet generally aspire to labor, but I didn't have aspirations for a cookbook. I really love food writing and I love food research and I love talking to people about food. I love cooking. I love community food work. I love introducing kids to different foods and getting them involved and watching them develop their own special relationships with these foods. And I really love working in this like realm, but I had not actually aspired to writing a cookbook and it just sort of came about. Again, I even when in my proposal for the book was not intentionally meant to be just a cookbook. So,
Right.
mhm.
Now, the cookbook Chími Nu'am means let's eat. Can you tell us more about the importance of community and shared meals in Karuk culture?
Yeah, yeah. So the thing about I think our foodways and how food fits into Karuk cultural lifeways is it's automatically community minded in that when we're gathering for our families, but we're also gathering for community events and to participate in community events and helping our neighbors out. So with births or with weddings or during grieving periods when the family is sequestered and they're not do want you don't want their family to do any actual work. We want to take care of the family as a community and rally behind them. And when we're gathering, we're thinking about the ceremony times, birthdays, all of those things, different ways of life transitions, like our moon time or a change of life or elder care, all of these things that as a community we take care of and participate in. So that's really what it means to be able to gather and to preserve and store these foods throughout the year. So we're thinking about, all of the things that we'll be participating in throughout the year and not just for what we're going to be doing and eating in our own home.
I think it's like a disconnect from what many people who just get stuff from the supermarket who have like say berries all year round and many things that you wouldn't normally have all year round because things are being shipped from all over the world. But and when you're looking at foraging or even like growing food, you're really always like I know when I'm gardening, I'm always thinking about what I'm going to do with the crops and how I'm going to store it if I have too much, etc. Or if I get berries, I got to do something with the berries. They're not going to just sit in my refrigerator for an entire year. So I got to figure out something like that. So how did you have to, did you grow up kind of like working with like the seasons, or did you have to kind of adapt yourself in order to think about cooking for the cookbook?
I grew up eating pretty seasonally and eating rustically, really rustically. And but also my mom did a lot of canning and preserving throughout the year. So yes, we did eat seasonal things in season, but we also had seasonal dishes that we would prepare made of foods that had been canned from previous seasons. And my mother was an incredible gardener, and both my parents were. They had a huge garden, and so we automatically were very attuned to that seasonally as well. So it wasn't just, gathering. We had kind of a variety of different ways because we grew up very rural. I didn't have any electricity or running water for a while, indoor plumbing and things like that. And so we sort of evolved into that, into getting those things. And all of the while, we're still, gathering. My dad is hunting, we're fishing, where my mom has this huge garden. But there were times where we relied on commodity boxes and those, distributions of commodity foods like, spam and cheese and all of that. So this combination of life ways, which I think my parents really naturally did anyways, blending these things, different ways of making our food ways happen.
For listeners who might be unfamiliar with many indigenous ingredients, can you walk us through some of the unique and flavorful plants or vegetables or fruits that are used in the book? Perhaps even share a surprising or versatile ingredient?
Let's see. Okay. So, well, traditional foods vary for everybody, and it can vary regionally in California, but one of the staples and cornerstones of indigenous foodways in California up and down the state are acorns. And acorns are incredibly versatile. They can be sweet and savory. And maybe something that people don't realize is that all acorns are edible. You can eat all acorns. The only thing is that they need to be leached of their tannins. Now they have a protective, they have tannins, much like wine has that kind of, dry feeling on your tongue when you've had some wine, the tannins from wine, it's really similar. So, but acorns have a lot of tannins and you have to leach them out over time. And so once you've leached them of their tannins, the acorns from different trees and all have different flavors and different balances of macros. There can be different, fat, protein, or carb content depending on which acorn it is and where it's growing. I believe it has also a complete amino acid profile as well. So acorns are incredibly versatile. You can make them, like I said, sweet and savory. And some of them, I think, they bake really well. If you can still, it's difficult to use because it's a gluten-free flour. So you definitely have to take care if you're gluten-free, you don't want to mix it with wheat flour. But I usually mix it in with the wheat flour because we don't have any issues with gluten in our house.
Yeah.
So I mix it in with wheat flour so I can just get that little bit of gluten. But so it still works. And it also works. The acorn flour works if you mix it with the gluten-free cup-to-cup matching flour. That is, I believe it's Bob's Red Mill.
Yeah.
And so, but we also have we have so many ingredients. We have a bazillion mushrooms that grow up and down in California that are some of the most, flavorful, delicate, robust mushrooms, every flavor profile. We have tan oak mushrooms where I'm from. High Vish is what we call them. really special mushrooms. They taste of pine and earth, and they're just wonderful. So yeah, we have mushrooms, berries, loads of berries, pine nuts, cattails,
Yeah.
fish, elk, quail eggs, pine nuts, or I already said pine nuts, bay nuts, pepper nuts, which we have quite a lot of here in the Bay Area. A lot of the nuts that come from the bay tree, the bay laurel tree, that can be roasted and crushed and turned into cocoa, or you can mush them into a kind of a Nutella, or make some. You can use it in baking applications, and it gives it a really that kind of Nutella flavor almost in your baked goods. So
I love that.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a decolonized approach for food in your book. Can you elaborate on what this means to you and how Chími Nu'am encourages this perspective?
That's a very big question, but yeah. So the thing about it is that there's a lot that word decolonization is used quite a bit, but in this case, what I mean by that is that we are starting to look at our food systems in a different way. That I think over the pandemic and seeing how fragile our food systems and our foodways really can be, watching grocery prices just go up for no reason. And people were, I think, really starting to become open to hearing about a different way of doing our foodways. And so decolonization can just mean that. It can mean that you are asking questions and paying attention, or changing the way you eat based on where you live. You're starting to pay attention to the foods that are just growing outside around you and developing a relationship with them. Maybe you have acorns, maybe pepper nuts or manzanita berries or things like that are around you, and you're starting to recognize that and jump into their rhythm and utilize that in your foods at home on a more regular basis. So, it can, I guess, kind of open your mind to all of the things that are out there as far as our foods go. There's more than 3 kinds of meat. There's more than 4 kinds of vegetables and 2 fruits. Like there's a lot of variety out there and a lot of flavors to be had. And, our food systems are really complicated, and there's a lot of politics involved in foodways and how our foods get to us and which foods we eat. There's a lot of homogenization in our foodways. We're basically whittled down to just these few foods every year, all year round in the grocery store. But there are a lot of different foods out there to develop relationships with. But I don't mean to just go out and start foraging. So part of decolonizing is also recognizing that you play a part in this system, that it isn't a grocery store in the woods. I do kind of hear that a lot. Well, people say, oh, you have a grocery store in front of you. But that is not the case. These are wild foods that are part of an ecosystem, and you play a part of that ecosystem as well. And it is founded in this idea of reciprocity. Go out and you see what you can give, what can you tend, what can you do, what can you fight for to keep this food's space, clean? Can you fight for their water? Can you fight for the land back? And you have to play a part in tending this area and joining with community who is traditionally tending that area anyway. So if somebody is to move up into Karuk country, I would recommend that they connect with Karuk people, and before they go out and start gathering things, asking if there's, if there are places that they shouldn't gather, or places that, that need help, or if there are elders that need food that they could share with. If they're going out on a gathering trip, you come back and see if they have elders who might need some of those foods, who are still subsistence gatherers as well. Things like that. And where I'm from, we have a lot of foragers. The foragers come in and they're commercial foragers, so they just gather as much as they can, and then they bring it down here to the Bay Area and sell it to these high-end restaurants but none of that money stays in our community. And there's less food for our subsistence gatherers up there, who, again, are always thinking not just of themselves and their own families, but how they can participate in community events throughout the year and share their food with everybody. So that's what I mean, I think, by decolonizing, is taking a look at what your relationship is and how to be in good relationship with these traditional foodways.
The one thing I think, if I'm thinking about decolonization or being sustainable or even healthy, I think anything that you think of, you tend to think it's going to be drudgery and the food's not going to be very good and it's going to be bland, or, it's not going to look attractive. But the one thing that really immediately struck me in your cookbook was a lot of the stuff in the cookbook immediately looked like stuff I would get in some of the finest restaurants. It was very beautiful, very striking, really amazing flavor profiles. I just want to mention a few things because it makes my mouth water just to think about some of these things. But like hearty elk chili with beans and acorn crepes, bear pozole, huckleberry hand pies, Spring's delicate wildflower spring rolls, peppernut mole chicken, blackberry braised smoked salmon, and acorn milk freezer pops. That was really fun. You got a lot of really beautiful, colorful, really attractive, I would say, and this is not to suck up to the guest, but looking at the cookbook, I would imagine I would get this at like the French Laundry or something. It would be something I would get in a shishi restaurant. So you made it really it's sustainable, but also I think people imagine, I remember in the 70s, I would go to restaurants that had healthy food or food that was good for you, that was sustainable, and it was pretty bad uniformly. And you've taken stuff that's sustainable and you've made it artful, beautiful, enjoyable. Was that in your mind when you made the cookbook? Did you just already cook this way?
I think that's the way that I cook. And that's what's important to me, is that I wanted my children to see that these foods are beautiful, vibrant relatives of their own. They have their own personalities, their own, way of being in the world, their own language and way of talking to us and being with us. And I wanted to celebrate them because I do feel that every chance that we get to eat our traditional foods is a gift. It's a celebration. And even in that daily grind of being a parent and breakfast, lunch, and dinner all the time, and including our foods, just keeping it in my practice of the way that I make my food, is that I always want it to have a little bit of ceremony and some beauty on to honor this food, to show that it's beautiful, and for it to look the way that it makes me feel, be able to eat these foods. And I think that, all of those fancy restaurants are the reason that their food looks probably so similar, is just that we're using the same food. Our traditional foods are the height, the pinnacle of what you can have in culinary experiences. Our foods specifically, you see rabbit and venison and our mushrooms and all of these different things, or salmonberry, and those are our foods, and they're naturally beautiful as they are, like a quail egg, or they all look beautiful because they are beautiful. And it isn't so much that I'm doing as much to them, that they just are. I think they radiate on their own.
Your book doesn't really just give you recipes that are going to be hard for you to do. You really do give a lot of instruction in the book and telling people how to utilize things that they can find and how to cook them. It's really, really wonderful in the amount of instruction. Like the part on the acorns alone, I think is worth the price of the book, because you explained it way better than anybody I've ever seen in any other book. So you did a great job there. I really was impressed by a lot of the explanation and the instruction in the book. Now, for people that are kind of looking at this and want to, try their hand at doing some foraging or using things that are local and wild, do you have any recommendations for people that's starting off? Like I, for instance, have some experience from my growing up, but if you don't have that, in the book, it kind of talks about this a little bit. What are some of the recommendations you have?
For getting started, I recommend just starting with one thing, picking one
Yeah.
thing that's close by that you see every day or that you see frequently. Like I said, manzanita before. They're
Yeah.
everywhere. Something like that, where you are picking the one thing, or a bay nut. Maybe you have pepper nuts or a bay laurel tree nearby, or you have acorns falling. Something like that. Pick one thing and just start there and just learn all that there is to know about that one thing. Really start to understand its rhythm and, pay attention to it almost in like a citizen science adjacent kind of way. You're paying attention to it, you're seeing, its life cycle. And sometimes you have a mast year where they're dropping so many more than they usually do and things like that. So it's actually a very, very slow way of adjusting your food ways, but I think it picks up a pace. Like you start slow in the beginning and then it really starts to pick up, and then you start to see it everywhere. But I would say start slow with one thing that you have access to, that you can affect and form a relationship with, and then branch out from there.
I want to go back to the book a little bit and talk about the look of it and the design. I really enjoyed the way it was written. Visually, though, is stunning. The photographs, the food photography in it is exceptional. Did you have any hand in that? Like, did you kind of help with the design of the book, the look of it, and the way it was laid out? Or did the publisher really work with you, or did you just have a good team you worked with?
Uh, Actually, I mean, I did the photography, and
Oh,
yeah,
I guess I didn't see that. Wow, you're good.
no, I really, that was the hardest part, was the photography. I mean, that's a whole entire career, is photography and food styling. So I was, I would think that I mean, I had to do a lot of learning and catching up and studying to try to figure out how to light things. I had to turn my kitchen into a studio. So it was very challenging with the photography to bring myself up to speed with that learning curve. So it was hard, but and yeah, my publisher Heyday was wonderful. They gave me a lot of creative license about how I wanted this book to look and feel and what the layout would be and the certain elements that really mattered to me. I really wanted people to be able to, especially I wanted Native people in tribal communities, anybody, Native people, to open this book and on any page see something that felt like it was speaking to them. Having a little bit of our goosefoot basket pattern, just one, basket pattern on every single page. I wanted it to have that medicine on each page. So when somebody opened it, they knew who this book was for and who wrote it. So that part was really important to me. I was really lucky to work with Heyday, that they gave me so much creative freedom in this book, which means I obviously have nobody to blame but myself if it doesn't come out right. But I really felt like they they were a very cooperative partner. And
They always do a great job. I mean, I love their work. I just really can't say enough about Heyday. I love everything they do, and I'm glad that you got to work with them, because this is truly an exceptional cookbook. It's visually stunning. The writing is solid. Everything in it all the way through is just 100% great. And I can't rave enough about it. For the people that are listening, I really want to encourage you to go out and get this book or get it from your library, because it's truly wonderful. How did you feel when you first got a copy of it in your hands? How did you feel?
oh, well, thank you so much, by the way. But yeah, it was surreal. It was absolutely surreal. It was more beautiful than I could have imagined. I think Heyday did a really excellent job. The production of the book and the printing is beautiful. I I couldn't believe how beautiful it came out in the finished product. I'd had this idea in my mind of what I wanted it to be, and it was just so much better than that. I feel like all of my photos looked better. Everything looked better at the end when they were, in the production of it. And it was it was a very full circle moment. Especially with Heyday, I had met Malcolm when I was young and had seen him tabling at Humboldt State, and seeing that our stories were worth telling. And it was something that I really internalized as a young person, that our stories really were worth telling, that Karuk people could publish books, and that people wanted to read these books. So, and that our stories were vital and valuable. So I had grown up with that, and I wasn't sure, I never really had, again, aspired to be a cookbook author per se, but I've always loved writing, and I've always felt like I had a book inside me somewhere. So, and
You sure did.
then coming full circle to having, this proposal sent to Heyday, and and getting to see Malcolm. I actually saw him at a Berkeley museum event, and being able to see him and have this full circle moment from childhood to 47 years old, to having this full circle moment of him and the work that he put into giving a platform to Karuk people and Native people in California, that it was just a really it was just a really like cosmically powerful moment for me. And I hadn't seen him since I was a kid. So it was just, I published this book, it came out, I went and did the meeting and at this event, and I saw him, and it was just really, for both of us, it was very powerful.
Now, can you mention who Malcolm is?
Malcolm Margolin is the founder of Heyday.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For people, okay. And then I want to ask you, what's next for you now that you've had this book come out? What's next?
So I am working on the second follow-up, or the follow-up to Chími Nu'am. So Chimi is meant to be a beginning piece. It's for people who are just getting started. They just want to start thinking about it. They're, just beginning to shift their perspective and looking for a way forward that centers Indigenous people and how to be in relationship and community with us. And so the next piece is taking it a little bit further, like we were talking about these community events, and taking it a little bit further and moving into gathering from a community perspective. So I think the closest thing I can compare it to would be like people who are really into prepping, and you're prepping and you're stocking your shelves, but that's a very individualist way of looking at having that Chicken Little kind of mindset, and it's very narrow, very individualist. Whereas our version of preparing is thinking of everybody and what we're going to participate in throughout the year, and how many feasts are we going to be looking toward in the year where we're going to be, taking care of each other. So it's preparing for community, I guess, preparing for these community events, and how to, cook or can have recipes that will help speak to these events. Like, what does a birthing, what kind of prenatal foods can you bring over? What kind of, postpartum foods can you bring over that incorporate traditional foods, that also incorporate the dietary needs that new birthing people have, and things like that. Elder care, how to prepare for those things in a nutritionally sound and fun way.
It sounds wonderful. I can't wait to see this book. It's very exciting to hear about this. Sara, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. It's just been a treasure talking to you. And I really can't, again, rave enough about your book. We have links to purchase the books in the bio and to look up online Fry Bread Riot. Sara, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely. And I just love librarians. They're the best.
Thank you very much. That was my conversation with Sara Calvosa Olson. Her book, Chími Nu'am, is out now. You can purchase it through the link in our bio and at all better bookstores. On Friday, we'll air our conversation with Maricel Salazar about her new cookbook, Latinish, more than 100 recipes celebrating American Latino cuisines. And on Monday, we'll be speaking with author Heidrun Metzer about her new cookbook, German Heritage Baking. That's all the time we have today. Until next time, I'll see you at the library.